Hi everyone, I'm Jim Tolles. I'm a spiritual teacher, as many of you know. I blog regularly at spiritualawakeningprocess.com. And I also do these videos on my YouTube channel, which is just Jim Tolles. Today I want to talk about politics and spirituality. I think it's a very timely topic and a very important one that I kind of feel like will only grow in importance in the coming decades because of all the change that's going on in human society right now. Before I go any further, this is just a quick reminder that down below in the information section of this YouTube channel, there's more links that you can look at that will relate to this particular topic. Politics and spirituality. So let's take a really big breath and a really big step back and remember that the spiritual path is about realizing oneness. Spirituality is the truth that we are all one. So from that understanding, we cannot say that anything is or is not spiritual. And we can't play this game that we're beyond something. And I immediately bring this up because this is a game more than a few people who think that they're spiritual are playing. They're saying, well, it's so unconscious, this whole political thing, or it's just uncomfortable, or they're not woke, or I don't know what the latest words are, but it's just a different way to say that I don't like this thing. I have trouble dealing with my own emotional states, dealing with this thing, so therefore I'm going to avoid this thing. And in this case, we're talking about politics. But let's also pause and think, what is politics? In a very simple way, it is group decision making. That's really it. It's group decision making. And of course, when we get a bunch of people, all still very attached to their egos, as most of humanity will continue to be for probably the rest of human life, who knows? It'd be nice to believe that at some point we'd all transcend the ego, but that's a lot of work. And plenty of spiritual people are just having trouble with reconciling politics and spirituality. So where does that say we are? In short, that means we're going to keep dealing with unconscious people and politics and everything else. And that's not to say that they're any different than us. They're not. And it doesn't really bother you so much the more you drop your own ego, whether somebody is coming from a space of awareness and understanding or stuck in ego resistance and ignorance, which is basically what I mean by unconsciousness. So group decision making is full of that. Why is this upsetting to people? And this is where our inner work is. That if in any way politics seems like a problem or it's not spiritual, that's just a reflection of something inside of ourselves that's trying to avoid something that's uncomfortable. And I mean uncomfortable internally. Again and again, I want to emphasize that we choose most of our emotions. They are done and chosen unconsciously by us. So I want you to think about this for a second, particularly anyone who's having a problem with politics right now. That when somebody does something political and is clearly unconscious, and there's quite a bit, it's not hard to find something like that, and you feel upset, that's your unconsciousness responding to say that you should be upset. So it's an interesting way where our unconsciousness plays off of each other. And in many regards, politics and anything that creates a strong internal trigger is a wonderful spiritual practice to work with these unconscious parts of ourselves that we do not have control over. And you can think about that for a moment. Take a breath into it. That's right. There's this unconscious in you that you don't have control over. So most of the time, when we're trying to avoid the unconsciousness of another, we're really just trying to avoid our own. Now, near and present dangers, those are a little bit different, right? But most of the time, we don't have a gun to our head. We're reading something on a news blog or news site that's telling us something that we don't like. Because most of the time, with politics, we're kind of getting it second, third, fourth hand, unless you actually are a public servant. It's a little bit different. Or if you're out canvassing, you're a donor, you're going to different fundraisers, right? Then there's a different level of political engagement. But most of people's political engagement isn't that much. And unfortunately today, people are getting really good at creating more and more elaborate echo chambers to tell themselves that their political views are correct. Right? This is massively delusional, and there's no safe political standpoint you can find where it's like, well, mine's correct, right? Because that's what the ego wants. You can be legitimately correct about something, but still be attached to an ego issue. Because there are a lot of different ways to solve things. We don't necessarily know what the correct way to solve something is. But a lot of times that comes into the whole political field of like trying to act like we know something that we don't. As a spiritual teacher working through the internet, I have such an amazing opportunity to connect to people around the world. And there is all kinds of change, creating all sorts of turmoil. And that's causing people to react. And there's all kinds of change, like climate change, that legitimately requires a response. And where are we going to decide that response? Through politics. Humanity knows it needs to find a sustainable way to live. Right? These are truths. They're not things that I care to believe in. They're just the reality that you see when you strip away all the nonsense and all the lies, and here we are. And you see that people are legitimately scared because they don't know how to deal with this change that's coming. And there's reactions going on of all kinds. We need people to be centered and open and able to admit when they're wrong in the political sphere and when they vote or donate or run for office. All those things are really, really necessary. And that to me is inherently spiritual in overt ways, not just like the ultimate way, but overt ways of being at peace with yourself, staying in that space of openness so that you can learn. And admitting that you're wrong about things is such a vital thing. Because another way that we engage with politics is this presumption that we're totally correct, but this is no different than any other belief or set of beliefs. We grew up in a particular home life. We were given a certain set of beliefs. We either adopted most of them, or we can go the other way. We can reject most of them, and then we're really reactive. Right? So we're still actually running off of the original beliefs. We're just reacting to them within ourselves. But all beliefs are made up. What we're interested in dissolving the ego, is serving reality, serving truth. And as I mentioned at the beginning, part of that truth is recognizing that we're all one, so we can't get away from anything. That is not a mature spiritual thing to do. The running away thing, it's a very common thing of people trying to say, well, I don't like politics, and I don't like my wife, and I don't like this job I have, and I'm going to go find some other exotic place where I feel like I can be safe and insulated all the time. Now, people don't say this out loud. They just start calling it spiritual. So this is a more spiritual way to live and to be and to whatever, have community and to think, right? These sort of spiritual ego things. are really easy to build up, because doing deep inner work and admitting that you're wrong and that you don't know a lot about yourself and that you're externalizing most of your discomfort onto other people, including politicians, is not a lot of fun. It is, however, in doing the work, very freeing. Freedom isn't really fun. It's beyond that. It gives us the ability to do and say whatever needs to be done and said to be more natural, and to even figure out what that natural state of awareness is like and how it will respond to life and to politics. And that sort of natural response is very different than the unconscious ego reactions. But I know for many of you right now, they feel like they're the same. When we get used to acting in certain habits over and over again, they start to seem normal. We start to think that they're natural. So doing inner work is so important, particularly as society is trying to figure itself out, figure out where it wants to go. Does it want to backslide back into a world of dictatorships and racism and all those types of things that are built off of the old structures that humanity still really understands? Like, those are very clear to us. Democracy is a mess. It's confusing because you're taking all these different opinions and we're trying to compromise and cooperate. And what do you do with all these technological advances? What do you do with these changes in how people are going to work? What do you do with like the influences of climate change? Like, all these macro factors are immense. And I think that enormity is part of what scares people further and saying, I don't want to deal with any of that. And since politics is right now, as I said, it's group decision making, that's our means of doing it. A lot of people kind of want to reject it, keep looking for that spiritual bypass. So in many regards, avoiding politics is a kind of spiritual bypass. And it doesn't work because we're still influenced by whatever the dominant groups decide. It's just sometimes the dominant groups are deciding things that are in our favor. And sometimes when that's happening, we think that, politics doesn't matter because we're not directly impacted in any sort of negative way or positive way, or if the positive way is too distant. So a directly positive thing is like if somebody gives me $100, I know I've benefited. But if it's $100 less on my, I don't know, deductibles and healthcare, right? It's a little bit more invisible. We don't see the benefit, but it's not big enough to matter. But if, let's say, in reproductive rights, something changes and now you can't do the things you need to do to take care of your body and what's right for you and whether you bring life into this world or not, you feel that more directly. And politics is influencing you. There's a lot of interesting little things that you can tease out with politics. And my encouragement is to be engaged and to do the inner work that allows you to be clear on what engagement means for you, what the meaningful way of being part of group decision-making is for you. And to be mindful of whether you have the crusader mentality who has to be the constant activist, or whether you have the avoider mentality who's trying to act like they're above it all. Be aware of your tendencies. Go into them, find out where they're coming from, and work to dissolve them. And work to dissolve even your political beliefs. Because that's how you get to the truth of what needs to actually happen. What do you really want to support? And acting in politics from that space is a profoundly different thing. And it's something that all of you have access to. I hope these thoughts have been helpful. As usual, I invite you to check out my blog more and check out these videos more. And I wish you all a beautiful rest of your day, night, morning, wherever you are and whatever time it is. Bye, everyone.